Hello, you're very welcome back to the P S Gilmore Story. I'm sure that the nerves I had doing that first video were nothing compared to that of the nerves of a young 19-year-old sailing across the stormy Atlantic in a sailing ship to North America in 1849. Imagine what was in his mind. What sort of a country is it? What are the people like? Maybe he had those thoughts and others, and maybe not. You see, he had some inside information, but more about that later. Today we're going to look at Gilmore's early life in Ballygar and the confusion within the estate and town that helped to make the man that became P S Gilmore. By the way, Ballygar was no different to any other part of Ireland at this time. And please also think of this video in terms of your own ancestors, no matter where they came from, and the environment from whence they left. So, question for you: what does Madison Square Garden and the Statue of Liberty and the State House in Austin, Texas, all got in common? Oh, and by the way, why did Ulysses S. Grant say about Gilmore at some stage, if he were born in America, he'd been elected president? Please don't forget to click like and subscribe for future videos. Gilmore's early life was indeed a life full of full of contradictions in Ballygar. For him, the town was full of people, including relatives and cousins and so on. But the overlord of the area was indeed the landlord, Dennis H. Kelly, a man who owned between 10 and 11,000 acres and controlled the lives completely of the 5,400 people on the estate. He was also the sheriff and the magistrate of the area, and he sat in judgment in the courthouse in Ballygar for all to hear and everyone to fear. Kelly even emphasized his right as a landlord, known as Seigneur de Droit, to have his way with the young girls of the estate as if they were his property. Awful. Each month, Kelly would inspect the town. He'd inspect the premises and evaluate each building for cleanliness and hand out prizes for those who had reached his standards. And I presume warnings for those he didn't approve of. We're very lucky to have Kelly's sworn testimony from the Devon Commission in 1844, when he gave 7 pages of deposition from the estate at that commission. That's 178 years ago. Why am I telling you this about the Ballygar environment that Gilmore grew up in? Primarily because it gives you an idea of what he learned to detest as a child, about how people were treated and mistreated. I should also emphasize that this is the testimony of Dennis Kelly, which would be classified as primary proof material today. Poverty was absolutely everywhere, and we'll see that later as well. And by the way, wait around till the end and you will hear Gilmore's band play from a cylinder recording of mine called, appropriately, Any Rags. It was recorded somewhere around 1902, so that is 120 years old. So back to Ballygar, starvation was coming, but I'm not too sure to what degree these people were aware of it. On evictions, and evictions was a very necessary way from Kelly's perspective of getting rid of the unwanted. He said in that document, I sacrificed a few areas and let them go there. And many have either emigrated to America or got holdings elsewhere. Many have become peddlers in the neighbouring villages. That little field that he had put aside of a few acres was 2.5 acres, and that became populated with over 20 families and was called Ballybeggarman. An estimate of that camp today, and the standards has to be made without sanitation and without any services. In contradiction, P S Gilmore himself came from a happy family, it would seem, and at least 3 brothers and 1 sister that I can presently verify. His father, Patrick, was a stonemason by trade. He seemed to be busy, as stonemasons were in those days, and his mother, Mary, took care of the family. But what is very clear is that this family was very well versed in the discussions of the day. They talked and debated, and that debate included all the women who were highly respected within that family unit. Again, this is reflected by Patrick and his siblings later in future life in America. And finally, in regards to education, Patrick and his family attended the national school in nearby Trihill National School, approximately a 2-mile walk to and from Ballygar. This local school was built by the English to standardise the education and to control the curriculum taught to the Irish in the early 1830s. They taught a variety of subjects including maths, geography, Irish, science, English, and of course their history. But before I leave the Ballygar story of Gilmore, may I also draw to your attention another event which would have affected a young Gilmore and his family greatly, and in fact the complete community of Kelly's estate. In 1843, the Irish political leader Daniel O'Connell MP held a series of huge meetings across the country to inform the Irish people of the situation in Ireland and how they as a people needed to control their own politics and their own situation, their own taxes, etc., etc. The nearest event, nearest meeting of to mention was in Athlone, and Gilmore refers later on many times to a protest march that he would participated in to Athlone. So they marched 19 miles to Athlone with a fife and drum band. There were over 140,000 people in attendance that day, and this was Gilmore's first understanding of the propaganda and the value of music that was played before the great leader came onto the stage to address the crowd. Later that summer, that first meeting took place in June of 1843, but in August of the same year, August the 20th of 1843, the great leader again came to Roscommon to visit his own family, some of whom lived in Roscommon, very close to Ballygar, and his supporters organised an impromptu meeting, again regarding the political situation. Kelly and the other landlords heard of this event in advance, and so to avoid their tenants being upset by such speech making and political rallies, Kelly ordered all men and senior boys from his estate to appear at the orchard of his estate outside Ballygar at 6 a.m. on the morning of that public meeting. And so, Patrick Gilmore, the father, and at least 2 of his sons would have been classified as senior boys. His eldest son, John, who would have been about 16, and Patrick, who was 14. This is P S Gilmore himself. So there were at least 3 of that family there that day, because they were tenants of Kelly's. And from 6 a.m. they, along with at least 1,000 other men and senior boys, were imprisoned in the orchard until 3 p.m. in the afternoon, when the meeting in nearby Roscommon would now be over. Oh, and by the way, at that meeting in Roscommon, there was over 100,000 people at that meeting. Later on September the 11th of the same year, 1843, the Irish newspaper, the Freeman's Journal in Dublin, published an article about this event entitled "Mr. Kelly of Castle Kelly Repeal." In no uncertain terms, it tore the foundations from where Kelly stood and made mincemeat of his arguments that he was justified in his treatment, or as I would term it, mistreatment of the tenants. Within a month, Patrick Gilmore, the father, had sent his eldest son, John, to America. And Patrick, the younger son, was now signed up to an apprenticeship to learn a trade far from the influences of Ballygar and, most importantly, Dennis H. Kelly. Don't forget, by the way, to click like and subscribe for future videos. And now, to some music behind me. Oh, before that, answer to my questions at the start. Madison Square Gardens was started as Gilmore's Garden in 1875. The Statue of Liberty was opened in 1886. And the State House in Austin, Texas was inaugurated in April, I think, of 1888. And all 3 were done to the music of Gilmore's band. So on to your first hearing of a Gilmore recording. This is a cylinder, it's scratchy, and it was recorded about 1902 approximately by Gilmore's band. It's called Annie Rags with no vocals. It's part of my collection, played on my Edison phonograph, also from that period. So I do have technology. It's just not from this century. See you next time, and don't forget to click like and subscribe for future videos. Bye now.